The first thing that I want to ask you, you're the person that I've always want to talk to about Iran because you have so much knowledge. You've covered it as a producer for CNN, for the New York Times. You have so much knowledge on this topic. And the first question that I really want to know is, if you were to describe Iran to anyone that doesn't know the country except for the headlines that we see every day on the news, how would you describe it? And what was the impact that the 1979 Islamic Revolution had in the country?
Thank you so much for having me, Yali. I'm so excited to be here and to share with your viewers what it means to cover Iran and to give a little insight on Iran from an Iranian-American, covering it for so many years, as you've said, and being intimately involved not only with the culture but the political landscape. There's a lot of nuance that's missing, but with every country, you could kind of say it with the Ukraine war, what's going on there. There's a lot of nuance that's missing in the coverage of these countries, and especially when it comes to Iran. The 1979 revolution is kind of like a marker between the before and after of what Iran could have been to the reality of what we're seeing today. But honestly, Iranians turned to a more pivotal turning point in 1953. The story began quite earlier, and that's with the CIA-backed coup of the prime minister at the time in Iran. So we think that involvement from a third party and fourth party country started then, and then the pinnacle kind of occurred in 1979. That's when you basically lost a secular, modern society that was drawn into a theocratic republic that became authoritarian in its iteration. So 1979 revolution is where it all started, where we saw, the authoritarian government come into play, kind of like throwing the country back into kind of, I wouldn't say the dark ages, but for where it was going, yes, the dark ages.
But what historical moments would you say that Americans need to understand in order to have a better comprehension of the context today about Iran?
So I think most importantly, the Women Life Freedom movement from 2022 shows us the grip and the hold that this government has on its people, especially on women, not allowing them certain rights or either physically speaking, governing how they dress and whether they wear a headscarf, a hijab or not, or even in the legal court system, you're not allowed to divorce your husband, and you need, to get permission from your spouse in order to do things. So the Women Life Freedom movement started with a young woman, Mahsa Jina Amini, a Kurdish Iranian woman, so from an ethnic background within Iran, and she died after being detained by morality police because of improper headscarf usage. That turned into protests across the nation, and you saw these pictures of teenage girls removing their headscarves and, little girls in classrooms chanting against the leadership, Khamenei at the time, and, people being arrested and facing expulsion from their communities, and even worse. There are many stories that I've covered, but that's where you see, that's the dateline of what's really happening in Iran to an extent of what's happening now.
And I think thank you for that historical background and context to what we're talking about here, because we've seen recently a lot of the youth coming out in valiant protests against the regime and against the government, and they do it despite the big risk that they're taking, which is a fatal one, basically. Why do you think that they continue to do so in masses? Because we've seen massive protests, and do you think that it will continue?
So this is a really good point that you bring up, because Iran and Persia before that, just generally speaking, has a protest culture. A lot of people come out in droves to support their opinion. We saw this during the 1953 political coup, and CIA-backed coup, I mean, and then the 1979 revolution. And then in 1999, we saw there was a green revolution or green movement, where students poured out into the streets in throngs, thousands across the nation. And then 2022, I'm missing a few key also large protests that we've seen. But why do we see this? I think it's in the fabric of our people to stand up for what they believe in. And also when push comes to shove and things get really bad, I mean, just imagine not being able to make enough wage to buy regular groceries like eggs, bread, cheese, milk, it's just simple things in your home. The wages are just awful, and jobs are almost like dwindling down. And even to the point of, okay, well, now you're looking at the content creator economy. There's a thriving one in Iran, but even they are not able to make enough money, because the businesses that they would promote are no longer looking for promotion. They're not making money. And so why would they pay a content creator to promote a business where no one's coming there? And also because of sanctions in that country, these content creators don't get the same opportunities that we do in the States or Europe or anywhere else in the world that's not facing this kind of regime. So when you look at that, when a young person sees that, I'm doing the same thing as someone outside the country, in the US, in Europe, and I'm not getting the same out of it, they're left with no other choice. They have no other choice. They can't get a job. Even if they get a proper education, they're highly educated, cannot get a well-paying job. They can get a job, I apologize, but they can't get a well-paying job. And so they see no other option but to go out into the streets and to protest and speak up for what they deserve, what they see that they deserve.
I don't even have to imagine it, because in Cuba there's a very similar situation. As you know, I lived there for 16 years, so the situation of experiencing the lack of good wages and the possibilities, just the potential of earning a decent wage that goes according to the efforts that you put by going to school and doing all the right things, it is tremendous. And I imagine that it's very, very similar in Iran. But I wanna, and I know you talked about this, but I want to emphasize a little bit about the situation with women. Mm-hmm. Where do you see this going, and how much has it changed in the last decade?
So it's great that you bring that up. It has changed. If we're looking at past decade, that's 2016. for those of us, it's not that far long ago, but the rights that women have earned, and I think because of this constant protesting, constant pressure that they've put on the government, and not as a singular female body, but as a whole, Iranians, both men, older, younger, women, older, younger, everyone in between, just, protesting and putting pressures on the government. In the main city centers, women are now walking around without their hijab like it's not a problem. Walking, and I've seen this, many instances of this, young girls with crop tops. So this, first of all, the Gen Z movement, or the Gen Zers in Iran, they don't care. They are fighting tooth and nail for what they think they deserve and the equality that they see other countries, young women that have there, they're trying to bring it into their own home. So while in the courts things have remained the same, in reality, the little freedoms that women are afforded in that society have actually gotten better. And I think it's because of how constantly they are pushing the envelope with the government and not backing down. But like I said, in the courts, when you're facing like a divorce hearing, or, when your father dies and you're owed, money from his will, they'll sometimes take it from you just simply because you're a woman and you need to meet certain criteria in order to get what you deserve, so to speak.
Is there a shift right now with the Iranian-American community and the perception of Muslims? What's going on there? And if you can enlighten me a little bit about what's happening around that topic, because I keep hearing there's a certain disagreement with, in general, the Muslim community. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, definitely. It's a very interesting point. Basically, if you go back to October 7th and the beginning of the Israel attacks on Palestinians in Gaza, you'll see, Iran was supporting Hamas. Hamas attacked Israelis, etc. So Iran is a focal point here in that it supported and supports terrorist organizations. So what we saw is people coming out in throngs in support of Palestinians and in support of just the Muslims under attack by Israelis. And then if you play that out larger into city centers, it becomes Zionist against, Muslims, etc. And what we saw in the protests on campus. Now, what we're seeing today is Iranians and a large part of people in the diaspora saying, well, how come those people who were against the war in Gaza are not coming out in support of Iranians against the Iranian regime, or against the Islamic Republic regime? So what happens here is now you have Iranians in the diaspora being anti-Muslim because they're saying, well, you guys are supporting Islam, and this iteration of Islam is supporting Hamas. It's very nuanced and confusing, but these are the kind of ideologies now that we're seeing play out in the greater public, where Iranians are anti-Muslim because of how it pertains to Iranians' livelihood in Iran. So this is why you have a lot of Iranians that are secular, because Islam has been weaponized in their country and they just want to get away from it as much as possible.
Do you think that organizations like United Nations are playing a key role when it comes to human rights and human rights violations in Iran? Are they doing enough? Because, the amount of money that is given to these organizations and the amount of progress that we see out of these countries like Iran, Cuba, and then we see the General Assembly votes and nothing changes. And we continue to give again and again to these organizations. And is it worth it? Are they playing a key role? How much progress have we seen out of their work?
I think it's giving them too much credit to say that they're making that they have a key role. I think they do come to play in the smaller levels, like very bureaucratic, like setting up conferences for how to deal with the water crisis, the water shortage crisis in Iran. And as far as, human rights concerns, a social media post is not going to cut it. I'm sorry. A statement in the General Assembly does not really move the needle on the ground, because we still see thousands and thousands of people who were killed in January at the hands of their own government. And what has an organization like the UN done other than provided a statement? And the Human Rights Watch just any government. No one came out to stand up for all these lives that were lost and killed at the hands of the government or the regime. And I just don't think, it's not my place to say I don't think it's worth it to pour money into it, but I do not feel that in the case of Iran or countries like Iran, the UN is doing enough. And I don't think I'm the only one who holds this opinion.
Definitely. So when it comes to the role of journalists, what progress have they made over the years? Do you feel the coverage is better? Do you feel it's accurate? Is it falling short somewhere? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think coverage of Iran has definitely improved over the years and in the West, so to speak, but it still kind of swings between two extremes. Iran is this, faceless enemy state, or, all talking about it being a terrorist sponsor, which it is, but also what is important is the people and what people inside are going through. And it's really hard to kind of cover a country where just in January, we had the longest digital blackout in history of any country ever, even North Korea, believe it or not. We were cut off from speaking with our loved ones and people inside the country for almost 3-4 months, if I'm not mistaken. It was insane that a government could block coverage of what its people are going through, and making our jobs as journalists that much more difficult, getting access to what's actually happening inside the country on the ground. That's when we saw the crackdown on the people of inside Iran, whether it was people, again, being blocked from their daily livelihoods, or being arrested simply and not having access to speak to their families. This is inside the country. And then being able to tell those stories as journalists here in the West was very difficult. Coverage has gotten better, just generally speaking, of telling these stories, but I think it should also continue. And just like the story in Afghanistan, the plight of women's education in that country and just women's rights, period, that should be front and center still, but it kind of falls to the wayside with everything else going on in the world. It's a constant struggle.
Have you noticed an increase in sources throughout the years that you've been covering Iran? Like, is there more sources inside the government willing to risk their lives and speak to you guys, to the big networks, like about what's happening, and give information so the coverage becomes a little bit more accurate here in the West, just so to speak?
Generally speaking, yes, people have become more willing to speak with media and have become savvy in speaking to media as well. This is within the country, within the government, within the Iranian government. Very few, but people do come out and speak out against the government as anonymous individuals. But also people on the ground are boldly coming, and this is the first time I've seen ever people come on, the major networks to talk about what's going on the ground from their home, using their full name and putting their whole life on the line, because they'll face repercussions from the government saying you're speaking with enemy media. So yes, people are coming out, sources are coming out to speak on what's going on inside the country. It's actually both sides. Journalism is doing a good job of covering what's going on inside the country, and people are also coming out to speak inside the country.
What are the toughest stories that you've had to cover when it comes to Iran?
One of the toughest stories, I will say, was during the Women Life Freedom movement in 2022, when Because in Iran, as with every country, you have inside politics and issues that the country faces aside from what is the general norm. So, for example, the southern part of Iran and the Sistan Baluchistan province, Iran is facing Iranians there are facing issues with the government separate from what you're seeing in major cities. Repression because there are Sunni Muslims there as compared to the major Shia population of Iran. And so the people in that province are persecuted even more than other provinces or other Iranians, so to speak. And one of the toughest stories I covered was during that 2022 movement when a young woman was sexually assaulted and raped multiple times by Revolutionary Guardsmen during these protests, probably most likely because she was Sunni and probably because she was from this already repressed province. And a human rights activist in that region put me in touch with her. And it was just the most difficult thing to speak to her, to try and capture for the Western audience just how multi-layered her pain was. It wasn't one or two things because of, the government is not giving her rights because she's a woman or she's fighting for them. It was just so nuanced because she comes from a repressive a region that is even more repressed than other parts of Iran simply for your religion. I mean, it was one of the most difficult stories to just listen to her tell me what happened to her and to put that into words for our audience. But yeah, that was one of the most difficult reports.
Do you think that there's a difference from the previous regime to this one? And do you think that the strategy of force and strength works with them better than a different strategy?
Those are really good questions. I don't think there's any difference, majorly speaking, between what's the new regime or the new leaders versus the old leaders, because it's still the same apparatus. Mm-hmm. The leadership may have changed. We no longer have the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, in play, calling the shots, so to speak. A lot of the top leaders are gone, taken out early on in this US-Iran war. So the tactics and the approaches are the same if you're looking from the Iranian side. And if you're looking from the US side, it's hard to say whether this use of extreme force is the answer, because honestly, I think in some cases it bolsters Iranian or the regime's ability to tap into people feeling that they're being attacked from the outside. So they need to stand up for their country and for their countrymen. So you can't lead a change with extreme force. Some people do believe they can, but also the gradual the gradual change, we haven't seen too much happen there.
And lastly, what is the biggest concern that you have with Iran right now? And what do you want people to take away from this conversation?
My biggest concern is for the livelihood of those inside the country. I mean, for a recent story I was working on with the New York Times, they wanted me to convert how much the cost of a piece of bread was. And it was 0.03 cents, US cents, for a piece of bread. The inflation is crazy. What people can afford is it's ridiculous. They now sell eggs not by the dozen, but by single eggs. That's how they sell eggs, because people cannot afford a dozen or even half a dozen. The economy and what the pressures that the Iranians inside are facing from just the IRGC, the government, putting them on just repressing them in ways that I can't even articulate at this moment, from ways they're stopping their bank cards, or arresting them, or using fear tactics to not allow them to even, I don't know, have satellite TV. There was a point where during the digital blackout that anyone who had satellite TV was under what's it called? Government monitoring, and the government would come and be like, what are you watching? What are you consuming? What kind of media? So my main concern is for the people inside the country, and that the situation will get better for them in any way possible.
And your takeaway from this conversation, what do you want to leave people with?
Being an Iranian is difficult, really, truly. I'm sure being a Cuban is difficult. It's sometimes on the radar. The world has its eyes on your country for a second, and you're like, wow, things can change. Oh my goodness, this is what we thought during the 2022 Women Life Freedom protests. We thought, okay, people are paying attention to what's happening inside the country. It's amazing. But then it goes away and your heart is shattered, because then you're still following what's going on inside your country. The world has moved on. And I just want people to keep an eye on these countries that really need it, these people that really need the change that they so deserve it of. And that's my wish for the takeaway that I want people to know.
Artemis, thank you so much for this conversation. We've had the little challenge of baby A, which people don't know, but Artemis has in her arms right now. Because that's how strong Iranian women are. And I am so glad that we had this conversation, because it's so important for people to understand the situation of Iran, what people are going through, the struggles, the coverage the media is giving. And I thank you so much for the knowledge you imparted here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Yali. It's such an honor to be able to share my experiences with you on this new amazing platform you've created.
It is my honor. Thank you so much.